Kexith had been a customs inspector for 17 cycles, and in that time he had seen every conceivable attempt to smuggle, deceive, or circumvent galactic import protocols. He prided himself on his ability to remain calm, professional, and utterly unflappable in the face of bureaucratic chaos. The bioluminescent veins running along his teal arms pulsed in their usual steady rhythm as he reviewed the morning's inspection queue on his hovering datapad. Then Vesper walked in, and his veins immediately started pulsing faster. She wasn't doing anything overtly wrong. She had filled out the proper forms, submitted the required documentation, and arrived precisely on time for her scheduled inspection. But something about the way she strolled into the customs inspection bay, carrying a battered leather satchel like it contained her lunch rather than items requiring xenoarchaeological clearance, made Kexith's tail coil slightly. "Morning," Vesper said cheerfully, dropping the satchel onto the scanning platform with a heavy thunk that made Kexith wince. "Got some stuff from Earth. Pretty standard artifacts. Shouldn't take long." Kexith's golden eyes, with their horizontal pupils, focused on the satchel, then on Vesper, then back to the satchel. His veins pulsed a bit faster. "Artifact specialist, Vesper Cordain?" "That's me." She was already pulling items out of the bag, setting them on the platform without waiting for instruction. A clay pot, some kind of woven basket, a chunk of rock with markings on it. "I've done this route like a dozen times. You guys always clear my stuff pretty quick." "Because," Kexith said carefully, his tail coiling tighter, "the protocol requires a systematic approach to." Vesper pulled out a knife. It was, objectively, not an impressive weapon. The blade was maybe 8 inches long, made of some dark gray stone that had been chipped and flaked into shape. The handle was wrapped in what appeared to be aged leather strips, worn smooth by ancient hands. It looked exactly like what it was, a primitive cutting tool from a species that had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel. Vesper set it down on the platform next to the pot and wiped her hands on her pants. Kexith stared at the knife. His veins were now pulsing quite rapidly, casting flickering teal light across the white walls of the inspection bay. "Is that a weapon?" "What? Oh, the knife?" Vesper glanced at it like she'd forgotten it was there. "Yeah, it's a hand axe, technically. Well, more of a blade tool. Pretty cool, right? You're attempting to transport a weapon through a Class 1 customs checkpoint." Kexith's voice remained perfectly level, which he considered a professional achievement, given that his veins were now strobing like a distress beacon. "It's not a weapon, Vesper said, waving her hand dismissively. "It's an artifact, archaeological specimen. Totally inert. Look, it's just a rock that's been shaped. Humans have been making these for ages." Kexith's tail had now coiled so tightly it was starting to cramp. He tapped his datapad, sending an alert. "Security Chief Grisk, please report to Inspection Bay 7. "Is that really necessary?" Vesper asked, but she didn't sound particularly concerned. She was now examining the clay pot, turning it over in her hands. "I have the export permits from Earth. It's all legal." Grisk arrived 90 seconds later, his bark-textured gray-brown skin catching the harsh white lighting as he stomped into the bay. The short spines along his shoulders and spine were already vibrating slightly, producing a low rattling sound that indicated he'd been interrupted during something important. His small black eyes, set deep under his prominent brow ridge, fixed on the knife immediately. "What?" Grisk said in his grinding voice. "Is that?" "A primitive blade tool from Earth," Kexith said, his veins still pulsing rapidly. "The human claims it is an archaeological artifact." "It is an archaeological artifact," Vesper corrected, setting down the pot. "Look, I can show you the documentation. It's from a site in North Africa. Properly excavated, properly exported, all the permits are in order." Grisk's spines rattled louder as he leaned over the scanning platform, examining the knife without touching it. His grinding teeth clicked together thoughtfully. "It appears to be sharpened stone." "Flint, probably," Vesper said helpfully. "Maybe obsidian. I'd have to test it to be sure." "And you carry this in a bag," Grisk continued, his spine still rattling, "with pottery." "Well, yeah. They're all from similar time periods. Makes sense to transport them together." Vesper pulled out her datapad, scrolling through files. "Here, look. Export Permit 7734E issued by the Earth Antiquities Council. Archaeological specimen, non-functional weapon classification, approved for academic transport." Kexith took her datapad, his long fingers leaving small teal glowing prints on the screen as his stress made his veins pulse even brighter. He scanned the documentation, his tail uncurling slightly. Everything was, irritatingly, in order. "The permits appear valid." "Told you," Vesper said. However, Kexith continued, his tail coiling again, galactic customs protocol requires material analysis of any item classified as a weapon, functional or otherwise. The scanning process will take approximately 2 hours. 2 hours? Vesper checked her chronometer. I've got a presentation at the Xenoarchaeology conference in 3 hours. Then you should have arrived earlier, Kexith said, his veins pulsing in what might have been satisfaction. He carefully picked up the knife with both hands, holding it at arm's length like it might explode, and carried it to the analysis station built into the wall of the inspection bay. Grisk watched with his arms crossed over his broad chest, spines gradually settling into silence. Primitive species, he muttered, still using sharpened rocks. Hey, this technology worked for thousands of years, Vesper said, leaning against the scanning platform. Why fix what isn't broken? Kexith placed the knife into the analysis chamber, a transparent cylinder that hummed to life with blue scanning beams. Data began flowing across the hovering screens around the bay. Molecular composition, density analysis, age verification through isotope decay. He settled in to monitor the results, his veins finally returning to a normal, steady pulse. This was why he appreciated protocol. Systematic analysis eliminated uncertainty. In 2 hours, he would have a complete profile of the primitive Earth weapon, would verify its archaeological classification, and would send the human on her way. Order would be maintained. The age verification results appeared first. Kexith looked at the number. His veins stopped pulsing entirely for a moment, then suddenly blazed bright teal, strobing frantically. His tail shot straight out behind him. What? Grisk said, noticing Kexith's reaction. His spine started vibrating again. Kexith's hands moved across the control interface, his glowing fingerprints smearing across the display as he recalibrated the sensors. He ran the analysis again. The number didn't change. He ran it a third time, adjusting for every possible margin of error. The number still didn't change. Inspector? Grisk's voice had dropped to a low rumble, his spines rattling loudly now. Kexith's mouth opened and closed several times before sound emerged. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. The carbon dating indicates this artifact is 47,000 years old. Vesper looked up from her datapad. Yeah, that sounds about right. Give or take a few thousand years. Paleolithic era. 47,000, Kexith repeated. His veins were pulsing so fast they appeared to be solid light. Years. The Veluvian civilization, Grisk said slowly, his spines going completely still, is 27,000 years old. Yes, Kexith whispered. We are the oldest spacefaring species in this sector, Grisk continued, his small black eyes fixed on the knife in the analysis chamber. Yes, Kexith whispered again. This knife, Grisk said, each word grinding out carefully, is 20,000 years older than our entire recorded history. Vesper had stopped looking at her datapad. She glanced between the two aliens, then at the knife, then back at them. Wait, is that a problem? Kexith's legs felt unstable. He sat down on the floor, his tail sprawling limply behind him, his veins creating a pulsing teal light show across the white walls. You called it primitive. Well, yeah, Vesper said, looking confused. It's a stone tool. You can't get much more primitive than that. It predates our civilization, Kexith said to the floor, by 20,000 years. It predates most civilizations, Vesper said with a shrug. Humans have been making these for ages. It's not like it's even one of the old ones. Grisk's spines began vibrating so intensely they produced a high-pitched whine. Not one of the old ones. Right. This is just from like 47,000 years ago. We've got specimens that are way older, hundreds of thousands of years. There's some debate about whether the really ancient ones were made by Homo sapiens or earlier hominids, but Kexith made a sound like air escaping from a punctured hull. Vesper stopped talking. She looked at Kexith, who was sitting on the floor with his veins strobing like a malfunction, then at Grisk, whose spines were whining like a damaged turbine. Okay, I feel like I'm missing something here. The thornback species, Grisk said, his voice barely controlled, achieved tool use 8,000 years ago. We considered this an exceptional accomplishment. Oh, Vesper said. Oh, you guys are worried about the age thing. Worried, Kexith repeated from the floor. His voice sounded distant. Worried is a word. Look, it's not a competition, Vesper said, walking over to crouch next to Kexith. Every species develops at their own pace. You guys got to space travel way before we did. We've only had faster than light for like 50 years. You had it for centuries. But you had knives, Kexith whispered, for 47,000 years. Well, yeah. We needed to cut stuff. Vesper patted his shoulder, leaving a handprint on his teal skin. It's really not a big deal. The analysis chamber beeped, indicating the completion of the full material scan. Grisk walked over to read the results, his spines gradually lowering from their whine to a rattle to complete silence. He stood perfectly still, staring at the screen. "What?" Kexith said from the floor, his veins still pulsing rapidly. "What else?" Grisk's grinding teeth clicked together several times. "The molecular density of the stone is unusual." Vesper stood up, walking over to look at the screen. "Huh, that is pretty dense. Must be good quality flint." "It is denser," Grisk said slowly, "than the hull plating on this station." Kexith's veins flashed so brightly that Vesper had to shield her eyes. "That doesn't mean anything," Vesper said quickly. "Natural materials can be really strong. Diamond is just compressed carbon. Obsidian can be sharper than surgical steel. It's just geology." Grisk reached into the analysis chamber with both hands and carefully extracted the knife. He held it up to the light, examining the blade. The edge caught the white lighting of the bay, revealing the incredibly fine flaking work that had shaped it. "Your ancestors made this by hand." "Yeah, probably. They were pretty good at it." Vesper took the knife from Grisk, holding it comfortably in one hand. "See the symmetry, the flaking pattern? This was made by someone who really knew what they were doing. Probably took hours." Kexith finally stood up, his legs still slightly unsteady, his tail dragged on the floor behind him. His veins had settled into a rapid but consistent pulse. "You transport this in a bag with pottery." "I mean, it's wrapped in protective foam in the bag," Vesper said defensively. "I'm not an amateur." "It is harder than station hull plating," Grisk said, his spines doing a single solitary rattle. "The foam is really good foam," Vesper offered. Kexith walked to his inspection station and sat down heavily in his chair. His fingers moved across the interface, pulling up galactic archaeological records. His veins pulsed as he scrolled through databases, searching for any reference to stone tool technology dating back 47,000 years in any known species. The results were clear. There were none. The oldest confirmed tool use by any currently spacefaring species was the Veluvian proto-civilization at 32,000 years ago, the thornbacks at 8,000, the aquatic quillfin at 12,000. Even the enigmatic crystalline Thari, who claimed ancient origins, could only verify tool use back to 21,000 years. Humans had them all beaten by millennia, and Vesper had called it primitive. "Your permits are approved," Kexith said quietly, his tail coiled so tightly it was nearly in a knot. "You may proceed." "Great, thanks." Vesper started packing her artifacts back into the leather satchel, wrapping the knife in what did appear to be very good protective foam. "Told you it wouldn't take long." 2 hours, Grisk said, still staring at the now empty analysis chamber. "You said you had 2 hours." "Yeah, but you guys worked fast, I appreciate it." Vesper slung the bag over her shoulder. "Anyway, I should get going. Need to set up for my presentation." "What?" Kexith heard himself ask, his veins pulsing with what he was fairly certain was dread. "Is your presentation about?" Vesper paused at the doorway of the inspection bay, turning back with a bright smile. "Oh, it's about early human tool development and the surprising sophistication of Paleolithic technology. I've got some really great specimens to show. Way more impressive than this little guy." She patted the bag containing the 47,000-year-old knife that was harder than station hull plating. "More impressive," Kexith repeated faintly. "Yeah, you should come. It's in the Xenoarchaeology Wing, Conference Hall B. Starts at 1400 hours. Vesper waved cheerfully and walked out into the corridor. Kexith and Grisk stood in silence for a long moment. "I need to sit down," Grisk said. "You are standing," Kexith observed. "I know, but I feel I should sit." Grisk walked over and sat on the floor next to Kexith's chair, his bark-textured skin scraping against the smooth white surface. His spines were completely flat against his back. Kexith's veins continued their rapid pulse, casting dancing teal shadows across the inspection bay. His tail slowly began to uncoil, though it twitched periodically. "She has more impressive specimens." "Yes." "The knife predates our civilization by 20,000 years." "Yes." "And she called it primitive." "Yes." They sat in silence for another minute. "I'm going to the presentation," Kexith said finally. Grisk's spines did a small, uncertain rattle. "That seems unwise." "I have to know," Kexith said, standing up. His veins were pulsing with what might have been determination, or possibly a stress response. "I have to know what else they made." "This will not end well," Grisk predicted, but he stood up anyway, his broad frame casting a shadow across the inspection station. "I am coming with you." "Obviously," Kexith said. They left the inspection bay, Kexith's glowing veins and Grisk's rattling spines marking their progress through the station corridors like some kind of mobile anxiety display. Behind them, the analysis chamber continued displaying the material composition of the 47,000-year-old knife, the molecular density reading blinking persistently in the empty room. Somewhere in Conference Hall B, Vesper was unpacking her really impressive specimens. The Xenoarchaeology Conference Hall was designed to accommodate approximately 200 beings from various species, with adjustable seating, atmospheric controls, and translation matrices built into every surface. When Kexith and Grisk arrived, 17 minutes before Vesper's scheduled presentation, there were perhaps 30 attendees scattered throughout the space, mostly academic types reviewing datapads and murmuring to colleagues. Kexith's veins were still pulsing rapidly as he and Grisk found seats in the middle section. His tail coiled and uncoiled nervously while Grisk's spines produced a low, almost subsonic rattle that made nearby attendees shift uncomfortably in their seats. "We could leave," Grisk suggested quietly, his grinding teeth clicking. "Return to our duties. Forget this happened." "No," Kexith said, his golden eyes fixed on the presentation platform at the front of the hall. "I have to know." Vesper appeared from a side entrance, rolling a hovering equipment case behind her. She seemed completely at ease, chatting with someone about optimal lighting configurations for artifact display. She wore the same casual clothing from the inspection bay and was eating what appeared to be some kind of wrapped food item. "She is consuming nutrition during setup," Grisk observed, his spines rattling slightly louder. "Is that normal for humans?" "I do not know what is normal for humans anymore," Kexith whispered, his veins flashing. Vesper finished her food, wiped her hands on her pants again, and began arranging items on the presentation platform. The hovering equipment case opened to reveal several foam-lined compartments, each containing carefully preserved artifacts. She handled them with casual efficiency, setting up display pedestals and adjusting the lighting to highlight each piece. Kexith's tail coiled tighter with each item she removed: a stone blade, larger than the one from customs, a curved piece of carved bone, what appeared to be a spear point, several smaller cutting tools, and something that looked disturbingly like a hand axe but was easily twice the size of the customs knife. The presentation hall continued filling. By the time Vesper activated her hovering display screens and tapped the microphone to test the audio, there were nearly 60 attendees. The scheduled start time arrived, and Vesper cleared her throat. "Hi everyone, thanks for coming. I'm Vesper Cordain, artifact specialist with the Earth Antiquities Council, and today I'm going to talk about why everyone needs to stop underestimating Paleolithic humans." She gestured to the array of stone tools behind her. "These aren't primitive. They're sophisticated, specialized, and frankly, kind of amazing." Kexith's veins pulsed so brightly that the Veluvian sitting next to him moved to a different seat. Vesper picked up the large hand axe, holding it comfortably in one hand. "This is an Akulian hand axe, approximately 300,000 years old." Grisk's spines went completely silent. Then they began vibrating so rapidly they produced a sound like shattering glass. 300,000, Kexith breathed, his tail going rigid behind him. "Now, I know what you're thinking," Vesper continued, completely oblivious to the two beings having existential crises in the middle section. 300,000 years. That's older than most recorded galactic history. How is that possible? She turned the hand axe over, showing the symmetrical flaking on both sides. "Here's the thing. This isn't just a rock someone hit with another rock. This is engineered. Look at the bilateral symmetry, the consistent flake patterns, the ergonomic grip." She held it up to the light, and the sharp edge gleamed. "The maker of this tool," Vesper said, her voice warm with admiration, "had to understand material properties, force dynamics, and have enough fine motor control to execute hundreds of precise strikes in the correct sequence. They had to visualize the final product before they started. That's not primitive. That's sophisticated cognitive planning." An attendee in the front row raised a tentacle-like appendage. "How many of these have been found?" "Hundreds of thousands," Vesper said cheerfully. "They're all over Africa, Europe, and Asia. Humans made these for over 1,000,000 years." Kexith made a sound like a malfunctioning air recycler. Vesper set down the hand axe and picked up one of the smaller blades. "And these microliths, 70,000 years old? They were hafted into composite tools, arrows, spears, sickles." Humans were creating modular, multi-component weapon systems while most of your species were still evolving basic neural structures. Grisk stood up. His spines were rattling so loudly that the entire section could hear it. "I need to leave." "Sit down," Kexith hissed, grabbing Grisk's arm with both hands. His glowing fingerprints left teal marks on the bark-textured skin. "We must witness this." "Why?" Grisk ground out, but he sat. Vesper was now showing images on her hovering display screens. Archaeological sites, layered excavations showing tools at different depths, each layer older than the last. The really interesting thing is the technological continuity. Humans didn't just stumble onto tool-making. We refined it over hundreds of thousands of years. Each generation improved on the last. That's cultural transmission of knowledge on a timeline that— She paused, glancing at her notes. "Actually, that predates every civilization currently in this room." The silence in the conference hall was profound. "Is she aware," whispered an attendee somewhere behind Kexith, "that she just called all of us evolutionarily delayed?" "I do not think she is aware of anything," Kexith whispered back, his veins strobing frantically. Vesper picked up the curved bone artifact. "Now this is one of my favorites. It's a decorated bone tool from around 40,000 years ago. See the carved patterns? That's artistic expression combined with functional design. Humans weren't just making tools, we were making beautiful tools." She smiled at the artifact like it was an old friend, then set it down and pulled out her datapad. "Okay, so here's where it gets really fun. We did some materials analysis on these specimens using the same protocols required for galactic customs clearance. Want to guess what we found?" "No," Grisk said out loud. Several attendees turned to look at him. Vesper either didn't hear or didn't care. She pulled up a data chart on the hovering screen. The obsidian blades have an edge radius of 3 nanometers. For context, that's sharper than most surgical instruments currently used in galactic medical facilities. Kexith's tail fell off the back of his chair and hit the floor with a thump. "The fracture toughness of properly knapped flint exceeds modern ceramic composites," Vesper continued, warming to her subject. "And the density measurements? Well, you saw those at customs, right, Inspector?" Kexith realized with dawning horror that she was looking directly at him. "The knife from this morning's inspection was denser than station hull plating," Vesper said to the entire conference hall. "Which makes sense because it's been compressed and mineralized for 47,000 years, but still, pretty cool." Approximately 40 academic heads turned to stare at Kexith. His veins were now pulsing in patterns that probably constituted a medical emergency. "Anyway," Vesper said, mercifully returning her attention to the general audience, "the point is that these tools represent sophisticated technology that served humans extremely well for hundreds of thousands of years. We didn't need metal. We didn't need advanced material science. We had rocks and bones and wood, and we made it work." She picked up the large hand axe again, hefting it thoughtfully. "Actually, there's an argument to be made that stone tool technology is more impressive than modern manufacturing because it requires no infrastructure. You can make one of these anywhere with the right materials and knowledge. Try making a plasma cutter without a factory." An attendee in the back stood up. "Are you suggesting that primitive technology is superior to advanced technology?" "I'm suggesting," Vesper said calmly, "that calling it primitive is maybe not accurate. It's foundational technology. It's what got us here." She gestured around the conference hall. "Humans made tools for 1,000,000 years before we made it to space. That's not primitive, that's persistent." Grisk's spines had gone completely flat against his back. He looked like he was trying to merge with his chair. "1,000,000 years," he whispered. "She said 1,000,000 years," Kexith confirmed, his voice hollow. His veins had moved beyond pulsing and were now doing something that resembled a distress signal. Vesper was taking questions now. Someone asked about the cognitive capabilities required for tool manufacture. Someone else asked about the distribution patterns of different tool types. Vesper answered each question with casual competence, occasionally picking up artifacts to demonstrate points, treating the 100,000-year-old objects like they were office supplies. Then someone asked the question that made Kexith's veins go completely dark for a moment before blazing back to blinding brightness. "Do you have any specimens older than the Acheulean hand axe?" "Oh yeah," Vesper said, brightening. "I didn't bring those because they're technically not my specialty period, but they're oral Darwin tools from 2.6 million years ago. Those are probably Homo habilis rather than Homo sapiens, but still our evolutionary ancestors. And there's some debate about possible tool use going back even further, but the evidence gets sketchy past 3 million years." 3 million, Kexith heard someone say, and realized it was his own voice. "Right, but like I said, that's really early stuff, pretty crude compared to these beauties." Vesper patted the Achulian hand axe with obvious affection. These are the refined versions, peak Stone Age technology. The presentation continued for another 20 minutes. Vesper showed more data, more images, more examples of human technological development spanning incomprehensible timescales. She talked about fire use, hide processing, adhesive manufacture, and symbolic behavior. Every sentence contained information that systematically dismantled Kexith's understanding of technological development across galactic civilization. When the presentation finally ended, Vesper received polite applause that sounded slightly stunned. Attendees began filing out, murmuring to each other in various languages. Kexith sat motionless in his seat, his veins pulsing in slow, dazed rhythms. Grisk hadn't moved either, his spine completely flat, his small black eyes staring at nothing. Vesper was packing up her artifacts, wrapping each one in protective foam and returning them to the hovering case. She worked efficiently, humming something under her breath. Kexith found himself standing. His legs moved without conscious input, carrying him down the aisle toward the presentation platform. Grisk followed, his footsteps heavy and grinding. Vesper looked up as they approached, her face brightening with recognition. "Oh hey, Inspector, Security Chief. Glad you could make it. What did you think?" "Your species," Kexith said slowly, his veins pulsing faintly, "has been making sophisticated tools for over 1,000,000 years. Well, our ancestors, technically. But yeah, basically." Vesper finished wrapping the hand axe and placed it carefully in its foam compartment. "And you only achieved faster than light travel 50 years ago," Grisk added, his spines doing a single confused rattle. "Right. We got a late start on the space thing." Vesper closed the equipment case and locked it. "But we got there eventually." "Late start," Kexith repeated. His tail was coiled so tightly it was starting to cramp again. "You had a 1,000,000-year head start on tool technology." "Yeah, but we spend most of that time figuring out agriculture and civilization and stuff. It's a process." Vesper picked up her datapad and checked the time. "Hey, I'm supposed to meet some colleagues for lunch. You guys want to come? There's this great place on level 12 that does amazing." "What else?" Kexith interrupted. His veins flashed brightly. "What else do humans have that predates galactic civilization?" Vesper paused, thinking. "I mean art, music, language, symbolic thinking, burial practices. Those all go back tens of thousands of years at minimum, probably longer, but the evidence degrades." Grisk made a low grinding sound that might have been despair. "Oh, and fire use," Vesper added helpfully. "We've been controlling fire for at least 400,000 years, maybe 1,000,000, depending on which evidence you accept. That's probably important." "Fire," Kexith said faintly. "Yeah, cooking, warmth, light, protection from predators. Pretty crucial technology." Vesper slung her bag over her shoulder. "Look, are you guys okay? You both seem kind of stressed." "Stressed?" Grisk rumbled, his spines rattling, "is a word. Because if this is about the age thing again, I really want to emphasize that it doesn't matter," Vesper said earnestly. "Every species develops differently. You guys have way better faster than light drives than we do. Your station construction is incredible. Those bioluminescent veins." She gestured to Kexith. "That's amazing bioengineering that humans can't do at all." "We evolved them," Kexith said quietly. "They are natural." "Oh, well, still cool." Vesper smiled reassuringly. "Point is, we all bring different strengths to galactic civilization. Humans just happen to be really old at making sharp rocks." She said it so casually. Like being really old at making sharp rocks that were harder than station hull plating and sharper than surgical instruments was just a quirky species trait rather than a complete recontextualization of technological development timelines. "I need to update the customs database," Kexith said suddenly. His veins were pulsing rapidly again, but with something that might have been purpose. All of it. Every entry on human artifacts needs to be recategorized. "Oh, you don't have to do that," Vesper said. "They're still just artifacts." "They predate recorded galactic history," Grisk said flatly, his spines rattling. "They need different classification." "If you think that's necessary," Vesper said with a shrug. "Hey, if you do update the database, can you make sure my next shipment gets flagged for fast-track processing? I've got some really old stuff coming in next month, and I'd rather not wait 2 hours again." "How old?" Kexith asked, though part of him didn't want to know. "Couple 100,000 years, give or take. Nothing too dramatic." Vesper waved cheerfully and headed toward the exit. "Thanks again for coming to the presentation. See you next time I'm through customs." She left. Kexith and Grisk stood alone in the empty conference hall, surrounded by vacant seats and the lingering presence of information that had fundamentally altered their understanding of human technological history. She called 300,000 years, nothing too dramatic, Grisk said finally. Yes, Kexith confirmed, and she is bringing older items next month. Yes. I am requesting a transfer, Grisk decided, his spines doing a long, slow rattle of defeat, to a different station, far from Earth shipping routes. That will not help, Kexith said, his tail finally uncoiling as resignation settled over him. His veins gradually slowed to a normal pulse. They are in the galactic database now. Human artifacts are on every trade route. There is nowhere to hide from the fact that humans were making tools while our ancestors were still developing opposable thumbs. This is extremely upsetting, Grisk said. Yes, Kexith agreed, but she was correct about one thing. What? The bioluminescent veins are quite nice, Kexith said, looking down at his teal arms. The veins pulsed gently, casting soft light across his skin. We cannot make 300,000-year-old hand axes, but we glow. Grisk's spines rattled in what might have been laughter. We glow. It is something, Kexith said. They walked out of the conference hall together, making their way back through the station corridors toward the customs and security offices. Behind them, the presentation platform stood empty, the lighting still adjusted to highlight artifacts that were no longer there. In the customs inspection bay, the analysis chamber continued its patient work, cataloging and recording data on objects that had been shaped by hands that worked stone before written language, before agriculture, before civilization as the galaxy understood it. And somewhere on level 12, Vesper was having lunch and probably casually mentioning some other impossible fact about human history while eating a sandwich. Kexith made a note in his datapad to expand the customs database human artifact category by several orders of magnitude. It seemed prudent.